All right, hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's lesson on adding and subtracting decimals. This should be a review lesson for you, but we are going to go ahead and review it together here today to make sure we are on the same page with adding and subtracting decimals so that we can continue forward. Our objective for today is that you will be able to add and subtract decimals in real world situations, so we will be looking at some story problems here today. Be sure that you have a graphic organizer or a notes page for today and that you are filling in the blanks and taking notes on that graphic organizer as we go through our lesson today. The first thing that you need to write down on your graphic organizer is you have a place to answer the following questions on your graphic organizer. So, on your paper, please answer, when and where may we encounter decimals? When may we see these in real life? And what does the value to the right of the decimal point represent? So please pause the video and answer those two questions now. All right, welcome back. I hope that you have some ideas for where you may see these decimals in real life. This second question, what does the value to the right of the decimal point represent? The value to the right of the decimal represents the part that we have left over, the part of the whole, the fraction, the portion of what we have of a whole number left in our answer. So today we have some steps for solving problems with decimals. First step is identify which math operation you need to perform, add, subtract, multiply, or divide. Today we will be focusing on just adding and subtracting. And later on this week we will look at multiplying and dividing. Our second step, once we have identified what operation we need to write the problem vertically or up and down and line up those decimals. And then step 3 is add or subtract like normal, bringing the decimal straight down into our answer. So let's take a look at what that looks like here. If we have the first problem, 6.6 plus 8.21, so that is technically 6 and 6/10 plus 8 and 21/100. I do first of all see that it is an addition problem, so I'm going to keep that in mind. My second step tells me to rewrite the problem vertically or up and down, so I'm going to rewrite 6.6 plus 8.21. Notice that as I rewrote that problem up and down, I did line up those decimals. They need to be straight on top of each other in order to solve correctly. And then I need to follow my adding and subtracting rules. I can add a placeholder 0 in any empty spaces I have and add like normal. 0 plus 1 is 1. 6 plus 2 is 8. And 8 plus 6 is 14. I bring the decimals straight down in my answer, and so my answer for number 1 is 14 and 81/100. In number 2, I do notice that the operation did switch to subtraction. That does not change my process. I rewrite my problem first. 5.4 minus 2.32. And I'm going to go ahead and add that placeholder 0 here as well. And I am going to subtract like normal. When I first start, I see 0 minus 2. However, I cannot do that without borrowing. So I'm first going to borrow. 10 minus 2 is 8. 3 minus 3 is 0. 5 minus 2 is 3. And the decimal comes straight down in my answer. Whoops, I apologize for that. 3.08 or 3 and 8/100 is my answer for number 2. All right, let's take a look at numbers 3 and 4 here. I am going to give you a heads up. In numbers 3 and 4, and as we continue in our lesson today, you are going to see integer rules mixed in with your decimals, so watch out for that. I see that the first question is an adding problem. However, I see that the first number is negative and the second number is positive. I remember that with integers, when I have different signs, I subtract. So I am going to set this up and end up subtracting. As I rewrite this problem, I'm also going to be very careful to make sure I line up my decimals, which means my problem is going to look offset just a little bit when I first write it, but that's okay because my rule is line up the decimals. I'm going to fill in with some placeholder zeros. And because my numbers had different signs, remember I am going to end up subtracting. So I do need to borrow again. I apologize for my dog barking in the background. 10 minus 2 is 8. 6 minus 5 is 1. 2 minus 8 I must borrow again. 12 minus 8 is 4. 3 minus 0 is 3. The decimal comes straight down to give me 34.18. However, I also need to double check that I have the right sign in my answer. I look back at my original problem and notice that 42.7 is bigger than 8.52. So my answer is going to be a negative number, negative 34.18. In the second problem, I see that I'm starting off with subtraction. However, as I look at that problem, if I would go ahead and set that up, lining up my decimals, I notice that once I start to subtract, I'm going to run into some problems here. 8 minus 0 is 8. Have to borrow here. And I have 8 again, but now I have 0 minus 1, and I cannot do that. So what I'm actually seeing here is that I am going to end up with an integer rule problem rather than just a regular adding or subtracting problem. So I'm not going to set it up this way. I'm going to first do keep, change, change. I see that once I do keep, change, change, that I have a positive and a negative number, so I am going to subtract. However, I'm going to flip those numbers over as I write down my problem so that I can actually subtract. Must borrow. 10 minus 8 is 2. 1 minus 0 is 1. And 1 minus 1 is 0. Bringing my decimal straight down. 0.12 is my answer, but once again I need to look back at my original problem and see which number was bigger, and that gives me the sign of my answer. As I look at the original problem, 1.08, I'm going to think about that like $1.08. And 1.2, I'm going to think about that like $1.20. And $1.20 is bigger than $1.08. The 1.20 or $1.20 is larger, so that means I need to use the sign of that, which is negative on my answer. Negative 0.12 is my answer. As you look at problems 5 and 6, I'm going to ask you to please pause the video and try these two on your own first. Be careful, one of them has integer rules and one of them does not. So please pause the video and solve these. When you're ready to check your answers, please play the video again to check your work. Alright, welcome back. Let's check our work here. I see that in number 5 I have a subtraction problem. So I'm going to rewrite my problem up and down or vertically, lining up my decimals and subtract. I cannot do 6 minus 8, so I have to borrow all the way from the 9. 16 minus 8 is 8. 9 minus 1 is 8. 8 minus 1 is 7, and my decimal comes straight down. So this was not the problem where I had to worry about integer rules. I can subtract like normal and get 7.88 as my answer. In the second problem, number 6, I see that I have a positive and a negative number, and so that tells me that even though this is an adding problem, because I have different signs in those numbers, I'm going to end up subtracting. 10.5 minus 5.42, being very careful to line up those decimals once again. I'm going to first add that placeholder 0 so that I can subtract properly. Cannot do 0 minus 2, so I have to borrow. 10 minus 2 is 8. 4 minus 4 is 0. Can't do 0 minus 5, so I borrow there. 10 minus 5 is 5. And then I have nothing left over here with that 0, so I can stop, bring my decimal straight down. Now, because I had integer rules, I just want to verify I have the correct sign. In my original problem, 10.5 and 5.42, I noticed that 10.5 is larger, so I'm going to use the sign, which was not there, which means it was a positive number. So I have a positive 5.08 as my answer. Now you'll notice that we have some real world problems coming up here, and here are some steps that we are going to use to help us with real world problems. We will use these throughout the school year to help us out here. First, we're going to identify what we are being asked to solve. What's it telling us to do? What are we finding? Second, we are going to underline or circle important information. In the past, you may have heard this as annotating, but this is just to help us focus on the important parts of our math problem. Step 3, identify what operations I need to perform to arrive at a reasonable solution. What operations is it telling me to do? And then step 4, set up and solve that problem. So in the first real world problem, the average length of the body of a Western harvest mouse is 2.9 inches. The average length of the tail is 2.78 inches. What is the average total length of a Western harvest mouse? You'll notice that as I read the question the first time, I did go ahead and start annotating. As we practice this, this will become more normal for you as well. What I did here is I underlined the two numbers. Numbers are usually important information in math, so I did underline those. And then I circled the word total. The word total is going to tell me that I need to be adding in my problem. So, as I look at the values here, I'm finding the total length of a Western harvest mouse. The body plus the tail length is going to give me how long it is altogether. So, I'm going to add 2.9 plus 2.78. Add in that placeholder 0. 0 plus 8 is 8. 9 plus 7 is 16. Carry the 1. 2 plus 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5. Bring my decimals straight down. And the average harvest mouse is 5.68 inches. I am going to go ahead and add that label from the problem to my answer. All right, let's take a look at the second one here. A piano solo on a CD is 5.33 minutes long. A guitar solo is 9.67 minutes long. How much longer is the guitar solo than the piano solo? So I am going to go ahead and start with those numbers being important in my annotations. 5.33 minutes and 9.67 minutes. How much longer is the guitar solo than the piano solo? That tells me that I'm trying to figure out what's the difference between those two. And when I think of the word difference, I do think of a subtraction problem. So I'm going to subtract the guitar solo time minus the piano solo time to figure out what the difference there is. So 9.67 minus 5.33. Notice I'm still lining up my decimals as I solve. 7 minus 3 is 4. 6 minus 3 is 3. 9 minus 5 is 4. Decimal point straight down. And my guitar solo is 4.34 minutes longer than the piano solo. Last real world example that we have here today. Alan is connecting 3 garden hoses to make 1 longer hose. And I'm going to stop right there and think. Alan is connecting 3 garden hoses. And as I read that first sentence, I'm already starting to think of a certain math operation. If you think you know what math operation that is, go ahead and write the symbol on your paper. As I read that first sentence, Alan is connecting 3 garden hoses to make a longer hose. I'm already thinking of adding in my head. If I am taking 3 separate hoses and connecting them, I am ending up with 1 larger hose. It does not make sense that that hose would be getting shorter as I add those numbers together. The green hose is 6.24 feet long. Orange hose is 5.755 feet long, and the black hose is 8 feet long. How long will the hoses be once connected? So I am going to add those 3 numbers. This problem, it is very important to make sure you are lining up your decimals just like the rest. However, we're going to have to be very careful because as I start to line these up, I'll notice that some have more decimal values than others, and also 8 feet doesn't have a decimal at all. So as I think about the number 8 feet, I'm going to picture it like money in my head to help me remember that if I had $8, I could also look at it like this, as you see below, 8.00. So when I write it down, that's how I'm going to write it in my problem. We said this was adding. I'm going to fill in those places with zeros. And I'm going to add. 0 plus 5 plus 0 is 5. 5 plus 4 plus 0 is 9. 7 plus 2 plus 0 is another 9. And then 6 plus 5 is 11. Plus 8 more gives me 19. Bring that decimal straight down. And my total length is 19.995 feet. At this time, you are finished with your notes page and finished with our adding and subtracting decimals review lesson. Please show the teacher your notes page to show it is complete, and you will receive the worksheet. Please take your time on this worksheet, show your work, and do the best you can.